this is a really simple fly to tie. There's just a few steps. I think the only tricky parts for new tires are going to be getting your eyes on and getting them cemented down so they're not going to spin on you, and then doing the weed guard, which just takes a little bit of practice. So I started fishing this fly in 2012. I do a lot of wading for redfish during tailing season between April and October. And I started fishing with this fly 11 years ago, and now it's the only fly I ever use. For me, if you get it in front of the fish in the right spot and move it, they're going to eat it because for some reason it's got the movement, the colors, whatever. So you start with a pretty heavy red thread. This is 210 denier. Just get your thread started. And when I'm putting on, so this is a 2-0 hook. I tie this fly on a 2-0 hook if I'm using lead eyes because it's a bigger fly and it's a bigger hook, obviously. And so this fly is going to have red lead eyes. Well, you'll see them when they go on the fly. You can barely see them in my hand there.
You're what, about 2 hook eyes behind?
I am about probably a little further than that. I like to leave a lot of room in front because there's a lot of activity at the end of the fly with trying to get the chenille over the eyes. As you'll see, I like the eyes almost be covered with chenille. And then obviously you got to get the weed guard in there too. So you need room for that. So whether I'm using bead chain or lead eyes, I like to make a couple humps. So you can see I'm making a little hump in the back there. I'm going to go up and make a little hump right there. And that just gives a spot for these eyes to sit in, if you will. So I put that handle of the dumbbell, if you will, right in that middle of that hump. I'm going to do a couple turns. And then really important is to take turns under early in your attachment process because you really want that fly to be on the top of the hook and you want it to be stable up there. So when you're fishing it, it won't spin. The reason it's important to be on the top of the hook because weight on the top of the hook, when the fly hits the water, that turns the hook over. So when it sinks to the bottom, the hook point is sticking up. It's not going down into the mud and the grass.
Catching crabs.
And when you're fishing tail and reds, you're sending your fly into places that real easy for it to get hung up.
I taught this in black and purple. Use it in the wintertime. I'll switch from the shrimpy colors and switch over to black and purple in about end of October, beginning of November, and use it all, either that or black and purple or black and black clouser on redfish.
I'm a big black and purple fan myself.
It's really good for flounder too.
Oh yeah.
All right, so you can see I got a lot of wraps on that. I'm going to check it, see if it's pretty firm. It is. Then I'm going to put a little coat of, I usually use crazy glue at this point, put a little crazy glue on there. We've got the solar epoxy. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that on there to get those eyes cemented in place before I tie anything else on the hook. And we'll just secure that. Again, this should help keep those eyes on the top of the hook. So when you're fishing it, they will stay on top of the hook. If you have one fly, I don't know about you guys, but it seems like the more fish eat a fly and make it shabby, the more they like it. And when that happens with one of these, sometimes all the red paint gets scraped off the eyes because the red's mouth just, I guess when it gets back in their crunchers, back in their throat where they crunch up the crabs, it just takes the paint off so you take your red thread all the way back. Nothing important about being perfect wraps or anything, at least from my perspective. Then the next step is the tail. And the tail is silly legs. These are probably orange barred, maybe orange grizzly, they might call them. So you take them, they're connected as you can see. And there's 4 or 5 strands in the connection there. So what I do is I double it over like that. Can everybody see it okay?
Yeah.
So once I get it doubled over, then I'm going to clip it so it's halved, pretty close to perfect. And then I'm going to take the two ends, the attached ends, and put them opposite each other. And I missed one leg in the end there. I don't think it really matters, but this is just something I do. I put those attached ends opposite each other.
It's like a claw.
It's like a little claw. I mean, you're going to break them apart, but it does leave kind of a piece hanging off there. And these do not have to be perfect. So you get them pretty close. And then you're going to take them and you're going to put them on the back of the hook. And it's going to make a big hump there because that's a lot of rubber to be attaching at one attachment point. So I take them, put them around my thread, if you can see that. So I've got them around the thread. Then I take it up to the hook, take a couple wraps, got to shorten my thread here, take a couple wraps, and then I'm going to go right over them. And it's almost like if you've spun deer hair, when you first put it on the hook, it almost splays it like deer hair, which is exactly what you want. You want them to be really sticking out there. Then you just try to cover up that big bump of rubber there coming forward. And it does leave a bump there that your body, I mean, if I was to do this fly perfectly, you know, I would ramp up here and make a tapered body. I never bother with that. It's something you could do. So next thing I'm going to do is put on my body material. You can come back in later and take your bodkin and you can break all these things apart. Because you want as many of these. You want this stuff just, when that fly hits the bottom, you want this stuff to just hit and just, you know, move. Just so it hopefully gets the fish's attention. And this is, in my practical experience, this is the best color of, this is UV polar chenille, and this is olive copper. I've tried, there's another version of this, copper something else that I've tried, and maybe it's just me and it's a mental bias, but the fish do not seem to eat it as well as this stuff. So I'm going to get this just attached to the hook. And obviously I'm going to take my thread all the way back over that hump so that when my body starts, it's starting right at where all those rubber bands are sitting there doing their thing. Now,
UV polar chenille, was it copper green?
Olive copper.
Olive copper.
It can be hard to find sometimes. It used to sell out really quick at Charleston Angler when they were in existence. Probably because I bought a whole crap load of it. All right, so now I'm going to take my thread, as you can see, probably about a half dozen wraps in front of the eyes. And now you can see why I'm glad I left myself all that room in front of the eyes. Because I'm going to take this material, I'm going to wrap it all the way up the body. I'm going to go through the eyes and in front of the eyes as well. And then I still need room for a head of the fly and a place to put my weed guard. So now we just wrap this. You can do this rotary if you have a rotary vise. This is a Regal. It's kind of rotary, but I kind of take my time, kind of tease out the material as I'm wrapping it. And it doesn't always tease out flawlessly, but you can always go back and pick it out. As you can see, it's happening right here. Just picking it out with my fingers. Because you're wrapping on top of the wraps. You definitely want these adjacent. You don't want any red thread showing.
Yeah, you end up kind of with a green body with the green thread that holds all that chenille on.
Right. But you want that chenille hanging off both sides of the hook shank. And if you have to take a couple wraps in some spots to make sure it's real fishy looking, that's fine. And the amount you cut off to get the right amount for the fly is kind of up to you. but this stuff's pretty valuable to me. So if I have little short pieces, I'll start a little tiny short piece on the back of the hook, secure it when I get to the end of it, put a new piece on, and just keep going. So if you have stuff left over, keep it. You can also use strands of this stuff to make nymphs for trout fishing because it's a great color for that too. And you don't have to go this low. You can tease all this stuff out when you're done.
I found it doesn't matter. I end up going back with a vodka and fucking them out.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah, and you can see this one's really lacking on the bottom, so it's definitely going to take some teasing to get that out. And as you fish it, it'll continue to wear and look fishy. Okay, now when I get up to the eyes, I'll take 2 or 3 wraps right behind them because I like a lot of this stuff kind of almost covering up the eyes, although I do think red is the color for the eyes for this fly. Again, I think the red thread and the red eyes, again, it's just been a formula that seems to work. And then I'll take it through. And Walter, this is a perfect size piece.
7.5 inches.
Okay, there you go. Take it through, take it back around, pick that out, take it underneath, take a wrap or 2 in front, and just about going to wear out this piece of chenille. Then you just got to find your rope, if you will, in the middle of it. So when you secure it, you make sure you get the rope. Just like when you got a Palmer dry fly, when you get to the end and you want to secure it, you try to pull back all your hackles, if you will, which is kind of these strands, so you don't mess up any of those. Then you kind of feather through there, if you will, kind of keep this stuff back, feather through. I'm not worried about the stuff in front getting hooked up there. Take a couple good wraps. Whoops. Then I'm going to trim this off. I like to push my thread away from me when I'm trimming, just so I don't have any accidents. And then I'm going to grab all this stuff and pull it back and really get a good solid red head. And this will taper down. Any of those little strands, you can leave them hanging. I'm trying to make this one prettier than when I tie myself. I could care less whether there's stuff hanging off the front of the fly, the side of the fly. To me, anything like that just makes it look fishier. But for people who sell flies, I think they try to make them look pretty to the humans who are buying them. All right, so once I get that wrapped down, now you can see I got a little bit of space right there on the hook shank where I can do my weed guard. We have any heavy mono? Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is probably what, 30?
50.
50, perfect. So 50 pounds, 50 pound mono. So really tight. So you want a piece about that big, if you can see that. And you're going to trim it back. So I'm going to trim off that because you get a couple flies out of this. Then you take this and you make a point in it like that. Everybody see that? So you get that point in it. Then you put that over your hook. Man, that hook is sharp like that. Then you take your thread and you catch it, take a couple wraps, then you pull it down tight, and now you got that weed guard on there. Okay? And then you just look in the front to see what you're trying to look for.
You're on the camera.
Yeah. When you're trying to look for, you look down the point of the hook, and you're trying to look down the shank of the hook, trying to see the point of the hook in the middle of these 2 strands of mono. And now it's just a matter of finishing the fly. So you can make this as pretty as you want to. I will take a couple wraps like through the legs, if you will, of the weed guard just to make sure it's nice and secure on there. It's not going to move. So in the weed guard, the purpose for the weed guard, from my perspective, is to get your fly back. So it is not going to keep you out of the grass. It's not going to prevent you from going through the grass and getting hung up. It's going to give you a really good chance of getting your fly back if you do get hung up in the grass. And you got to be careful. When I trim the weed guard, I try to trim it right at the hook point and not let it go below. I have been out fishing, had fish eat and missed them, and I was convinced it's because my weed guard was too long. And while I'm out there fishing, I'll trim it back and make sure it's the right length. So you can get this head as pretty as you want. Can you see?
Yep.
Sorry.
There you go.
Sorry. All right, so I'm pretty close to a good head, so I do a whip finish on it. So I'm going to do the whip finish. And I'll do a couple of these. And again, I like a thread I can really tug on for securing those rubber legs, for getting the eyes in place, and for getting a real tight cinch on the whip finish. So you can see, not the best looking head. It's a little stair-stepped, if you will.
Push it down a little more. There you go.
You can see a little stair step in there. So if you want to make it perfect, you can go back in and wrap more thread so you got a nice tapered head. Frankly, I'm not sure redfish care about that. So to me, this fly would be done with one exception. So I'd snip it. Last thing I got to do is trim the weed guard. So when I trim the weed guard, get all your fishy stuff out of the way so you don't inadvertently trim that, although a piece or two is not going to hurt it. And I'm looking back and I'm looking at where that hook shank is, and you want to do one swift cut and cut them both. And then your weed guard's good to go. And it's just about right. Yep.